Tensions between the United States and Venezuela have reached a dangerous new level, sending shockwaves throughout the region and beyond. In 2025, military posturing and harsh rhetoric have escalated rapidly, with both sides trading accusations and warnings almost daily. The U.S. has long criticized Venezuela's government, but now, actions speak louder than words as diplomatic channels break down and threats become policy. President Donald Trump shocked the world by declaring all Venezuelan airspace closed, warning airlines and so-called traffickers to stay away, a move that stunned even close U.S. allies. Caracas immediately condemned the move as illegal aggression, urging the world to reject what they called a colonial threat, and rallying their supporters in the streets. Even the Pentagon seemed caught off guard, fueling debate about decision-making in Washington and raising questions about the chain of command. U.S. warships now patrol near Venezuela, raising fears of imminent conflict and sending a clear message of American resolve. The U.S. accuses Venezuela of corruption and drug trafficking. Venezuela claims the U.S. wants regime change and control of its oil, deepening the mistrust on both sides. This standoff has moved from words to military maneuvers, making the threat of direct conflict real and leaving little room for compromise. The world watches anxiously as the crisis deepens, with global leaders calling for restraint but few signs of de-escalation. The presence of U.S. forces and the airspace closure have made the situation far more volatile, increasing the risk of a miscalculation that could spark open conflict. The possibility of war, once unthinkable, now feels dangerously close, casting a shadow over the Caribbean and leaving millions uncertain about what tomorrow may bring. President Nicolas Maduro addressed a massive crowd in Caracas, vowing Venezuela would never accept peace at the cost of its freedom. "We want peace, but peace with sovereignty, equality, and freedom," he declared, drawing cheers. Maduro accused the U.S. of using military threats as a cover to seize Venezuela's oil. He described weeks of psychological terrorism from Washington, meant to destabilize his government. The speech was a rallying cry for unity and resistance, framing the conflict as a fight against imperialism, not the American people. "No peace in chains," he insisted. Venezuela would rather fight than submit. His words inspired patriotism and a sense of shared purpose. Maduro projected strength, assuring citizens the government would not back down. He emphasized Venezuela's right to self-determination and defense. The speech, broadcast nationwide, became a symbol of defiance. Venezuela's position is clear. Peace is possible, but only as equals. They refuse to be anyone's colony. The U.S. has matched its rhetoric with overwhelming military force, sending a clear message to both allies and adversaries in the region. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest and most advanced aircraft carrier, now leads a formidable strike group in the Caribbean, bristling with fighter jets and support vessels. Its presence signals a dramatic escalation in U.S. military posture. This is the biggest U.S. military presence in Latin America since 1989, dwarfing previous deployments and evoking memories of past interventions in the region. Venezuela sees the fleet as a direct threat of invasion, heightening tensions and putting its own armed forces on high alert along the coast. U.S. Southern Command has conducted over 20 deadly strikes on vessels near Venezuela since September 2025, claiming to target drug traffickers and criminal networks operating in the area. At least 83 people have died in these operations, but the U.S. has provided no public evidence linking the targets to drug smuggling, fueling suspicion and anger among local communities. Human rights groups call the strikes illegal under international law, warning that such actions set a dangerous precedent for military conduct worldwide. One incident, a suspected double-tap strike, sparked outrage, as it may have targeted rescuers, a potential war crime that has drawn condemnation from humanitarian organizations. Critics argue President Trump is using force without congressional approval, violating the Constitution and bypassing the checks and balances designed to limit executive power. Lawmakers from both parties have raised alarms about executive overreach, demanding greater transparency and accountability for military actions abroad. The administration insists the actions are lawful and necessary to protect U.S. interests, but the debate rages on in Washington and beyond. The controversy has deepened political divisions in the U.S., fueling protests and heated debates across the country. The world is watching as the crisis escalates, uncertain of what the next move will be in this high-stakes standoff. The U.S. claims its military actions target drug traffickers, labeling them terrorists to justify strikes without congressional approval. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth insists the operations are legal, framing them as law enforcement on a grand scale. Venezuela and many others are deeply skeptical, seeing the anti-drug narrative as a pretext for regime change and control of oil. The White House's consideration of a pardon for convicted Honduran drug trafficker Juan Orlando Hernandez further undermines U.S. credibility. Critics, like Senator Tim Kaine, highlight the contradiction fighting drugs in Venezuela while freeing a drug kingpin. For Venezuela, this is about U.S. dominance, not crime. The deployment of warships and deadly strikes point to a plan for political change. This fundamental disagreement, drugs or dominance, makes peace elusive. Mistrust runs deep, fueling the crisis. Venezuela's neighbors are reacting strongly to the crisis. Cuba, a steadfast ally, condemned U.S. actions as military aggression and a threat to regional stability. Havana's response reflects its own history of resisting U.S. pressure. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro, once a close U.S. ally, now criticizes Washington's use of force, calling for regional sovereignty. Petro's stance signals growing unease in Latin America over renewed U.S. interventionism. Many in the region recall painful memories of past U.S. interventions and fear a dangerous precedent. Leaders like Petro advocate for diplomacy, not military pressure. Cuba's support and Colombia's criticism give Venezuela political backing and isolate the U.S. diplomatically. While lacking military power, these countries' voices matter on the global stage. They call for respect for sovereignty and non-intervention. The region is united in demanding a peaceful solution. At the heart of the conflict is oil, an ever-present force that shapes Venezuela's destiny and influences global politics. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven reserves, a staggering amount that surpasses even the oil-rich nations of the Middle East. With over 300 billion barrels beneath its soil, Venezuela's oil wealth is both a blessing and a source of ongoing tension, drawing the eyes of powerful nations. The Venezuelan government believes U.S. interest is driven by a desire to control this vast resource, fueling suspicion and mistrust. Most of Venezuela's oil is extra-heavy crude, which is difficult and costly to extract, requiring advanced technology and significant investment. Despite its immense reserves, Venezuela's oil exports remain modest. Just over $4 billion in 2023, far less than oil giants like Saudi Arabia or the U.S. Ironically, the U.S. remains Venezuela's largest trading partner, buying about half its oil exports even as political tensions simmer. This economic interdependence complicates the standoff, making it difficult for either side to sever ties without serious consequences. Hostility in politics contrasts sharply with ongoing trade, making escalation risky for both sides and raising the stakes of every decision. For Venezuela, oil is a lifeline that supports its economy. For the U.S., it's a strategic asset that can't be ignored. The struggle is about more than politics. It's about who controls this immense wealth and the future it promises. Any conflict could have severe financial consequences, not just for Venezuela, but for global markets as well. Oil is the silent force shaping every move in this crisis, influencing decisions behind closed doors and on the world stage. The stakes could not be higher, as the world watches to see who will ultimately control Venezuela's vast oil riches. The crisis is taking a heavy toll on ordinary Venezuelans. Years of economic hardship, shortages, and instability are now compounded by the threat of war. Fear and anxiety grip the population, from cities to rural areas. U.S. military strikes, allegedly targeting traffickers, have killed dozens, possibly including innocent civilians. Human rights groups warn of a lack of transparency and accountability. The suspected double-tap strike has drawn international outrage, raising questions about U.S. compliance with the laws of war. Beyond violence, the threat of conflict disrupts trade, worsens shortages, and deepens suffering. Trump's airspace closure could block vital humanitarian aid. The true cost is measured in fear, loss, and uncertainty for millions. Venezuela is not standing by as U.S. forces gather nearby. The government has put its military on high alert, conducting exercises along the coast to signal readiness. Despite this, Venezuela's military is outmatched. Much of its equipment is outdated, and soldiers are poorly paid. To ensure loyalty, Maduro has given military leaders key government roles, tying their fortunes to his survival. So far, this strategy has kept the top ranks united. The government is also mobilizing civilians, calling for unity and vigilance. Patriotic resistance is the message. Venezuela may lack firepower, but not the will to fight. The nation braces for an uncertain future, preparing for a possible struggle for sovereignty. The unity of the armed forces and the people will be crucial. Venezuela's defense is as much psychological as military. The country stands on edge, ready for whatever comes next. As the crisis deepens, Maduro's message is one of resilience and defiance. He frames the confrontation as a historic fight for Venezuela's soul and independence. "We don't want peace with being slaves," he repeats, a call to reject colonialism and imperialism. Maduro urges Venezuelans to unite, endure hardship, and defend their freedom. The government highlights military loyalty and international support as signs of strength. This is a psychological battle as much as a military one. By projecting unity and resolve, Venezuela hopes to deter U.S. intervention. The future is uncertain, but Caracas stands firm. It will not trade freedom for submission. The world is watching to see if this determination will be enough. For now, Venezuela's message is clear. It will not live in chains.